Welcome to the Steve and Bethany podcast.
It's your weekly dose of hope, encouragement, and a whole lot of fun.
All right, let's get to it.
It's episode 16.
All right, welcome in. Steve and Bethany Hopecast is underway. We are glad you're here. And we missed some fun stuff. If you don't have Patreon, you missed some fun stuff in the early part of the pre-show here. That was, it was nuts. Okay, but we're glad that you're here. And we're going to continue a topic that we started last week because last week we did witnessing and talking about Jesus and everything that goes along with that, except like one thing.
One thing.
Yeah, I got to thinking about it when I was listening to it back, and I don't know if you felt the same way, but it's like, we left something on the table.
Well, you sent me a text, and you were like, hey, we didn't really cover this. Talking to unbelievers about Jesus, because we were talking about kind of people that maybe have heard about Jesus or just kind of the importance of it, but not really, well, who are you sharing it to? And that's unbelievers. And
we're going to be getting to that here in just a second. The aftercast, for those of you on Patreon, is going to be the story complete with picture of how Bethany hurt herself, broke a bone, giving a high five.
Giving a high five. I will share that story in excruciating detail in the aftercast.
Yeah, and then before we get to getting started today on the witnessing to the unbelievers, I have something really cool. Okay. This is a fun story. My wife is involved with what's a little ministry called Community Bible Study. Okay?
CBS, yeah.
And she's in the leadership there, and she was having some meetings with other leaders. And a lady that's one of the leaders in Community Bible Study said, I got to tell you something. And she's like, okay, what? She said, we were in church, and we're a small congregation, but we have announcements at the end of service. You know, people can stand up and make announcements.
Right.
And so one lady stood up and began to tell everyone in the congregation about the Steve and Bethany Hopecast and how she has listened to every episode and how everyone else needs to do the same.
No way. That is so cool.
Her name is Jackie Waynes. And
Jackie, thanks.
We are so appreciative.
That is so cool.
I had no idea.
That literally made my day. I'm not even kidding.
It really is nice. So we thank Miss Jackie for being a voice for us.
Yeah, super really, supportive. I
really
love it.
Fun. Yeah, really nice, and it made my day too when I heard it. I was just blown away. So
that's awesome.
That's really cool. Okay, so let's get into the topic at hand. We're talking about how to and why should we talk to others about Jesus, especially those who don't believe.
Well, I was thinking about this actually on the drive-in when I was on my way here. I thought, you know, maybe this is part of kind of living in the Bible Belt where we are, is that we maybe assume, well, this is the Bible Belt. Everybody's heard about Jesus. Everybody's maybe been to church. They may not be believers, but they've at least had some interaction with God and church and had some knowledge of that. But I thought that's something that we're gravely mistaken on a lot of the time, because even though this is the Bible Belt and there's a church on every corner, there's still people that have no idea who Jesus is, no idea the freedom and the hope and the grace that comes through a relationship with him.
I think you're absolutely right. But here's the thing, though, is I think those self-same people would identify as Christian simply because they're not Muslim, they're not Jewish, they live here in the middle of the Bible Belt. So, well, I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
Which is probably the biggest hurdle you have to kind of get over, because
is what actually is a Christian?
Is exactly what is a Christian. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
So what is a Christian versus what is not? Because I think a lot of times, you know, we talked about it a little bit last week with with morality, you know, being a moral person, a good person. And believe it or not, that's what, you know, every other kind of religion is based on. Whereas you do something good, and then the higher being, the deity, accepts it or not. You know, it's up to how much
works-based.
It's up to how much good you do.
Yeah.
Whereas what makes Christianity different is when it's already done. And then it's up to us to obey.
And I think, unfortunately, so many people still take that previous mindset and put it towards Christianity.
Oh, I know.
Even though they know that it's been paid for and your sins are forgiven when you become a believer, they still kind of have that mentality of, it's up to me. Like, I'm saved, but I still need to work really, really hard to be a good person, because otherwise God is going to get mad at me. And then, you know, all these fake things come in, like I could lose my salvation, or I could, somehow kind of fall out of line with God, and not having the mindset of we obey and we do the right thing and we are good people because of what God has done with us and out of obedience, not out of this mindset of I have to perform and reach some standard. We can't reach the standard. That's what the Bible says. We fallen short.
Yeah, the bar is set too high.
Right.
And it doesn't matter how good you are versus, like me versus you versus Jarvis. Obviously, Jarvis is going to fall way far down to the bottom.
Rude.
But it doesn't matter, right? I mean, it doesn't matter because even though you attain this level and somebody else is at this level, you're still missing the goal. You're still missing the mark. But let's get to a little bit more of the nitty gritty of it. Okay, let's talk about the people in your life, the people, whether they be somebody you work with or maybe even family members that aren't believers. How do you approach that? What are some practical tips of approaching? Because here's the thing. We come from a foundation that, a relationship with Christ means not only do you have a peace and a purpose and a hope in this life, but you also have hope in the life to come.
Yeah.
Without a relationship with Christ, the Bible teaches that you don't have any of that and you're destined to spend eternity away from him. So if that's absolutely true, then it should be imperative on us to share with those people. But how do you do it?
Well, I think, maybe it's just me that feels this way, but sometimes it can be easier to share your faith with somebody that you don't know from Adam than somebody in your family. Like there's kind of, when you have a personal relationship, it can feel harder because you think, well, I'm close with this person, and for me to have this conversation, I have to bring up like, hey, you're not perfect. You're separate from God before you're saved. And so I think it can be hard to bring up those conversations, but I mean, it's commanded of us. It's part of the Great Commission to go and make disciples and share the good word, the good news. But I think it starts with having just an honest conversation about our shortcomings and sharing, like, listen, I might be a Christian, but I'm definitely not perfect. This is where I fall short. These are my struggles. And even after you get saved, you're still going to deal with stuff. So it's being open and being vulnerable and honest about the ways that you're short and not doing well, honestly, in a lot of areas. And then saying, but listen, God still loves you and he still laid his life down for you. So why wouldn't you want to be a part of that and to kind of open yourself up to a relationship with God?
I think that's absolutely right. And then also there's the element of when you're talking to someone about that and you're trying to reach them, I think they have to see something different in you. If they see the same life that they're living with not a lot of hope, not a lot of direction, not anything different, then why would they listen to you about a relationship with God?
Right.
I think if you're following after God, and that means, obeying the word, and it means living your life in such a way where God is in control and God makes the decisions for you, people are going to notice that.
Yeah.
People are going to see that in your life. And so when you come time to open that door and you start to talk to that person about their need for a relationship with God, I think they'll be more receptive to you because they see that you're the real deal.
Well, and I think too, it's honestly looking at life through kind of a different lens without being legalistic and being overly judgmental. It's a difference in the way that you talk, the music that you listen to, the movies you watch, the way that you dress, how you carry yourself, how you interact with people, maybe having a lot more grace towards people than the average person would, even when you're not in the wrong, which is a very hard thing to do. We all know that.
It is. Sure
but I think it's looking at life differently and saying, like, I'm supposed to be set apart, and this is how I need to, act and present myself. And then, you're right. When people look at you, they say, okay, that's different. What's different about you? And kind of start asking those questions.
That's absolutely right. And the Bible calls that kind of life you're describing as living holy.
Right.
It's not better than, it's not superior to, it's just different.
Yeah.
And it's a life set apart, like you use that word, set apart for God and set apart, living a different way of life. When we come back from the break, I'm going to tell you a story about reaching out to a family member of mine that didn't believe and how hard that was. I mean, it was a years and years and years struggle going back and forth, trying to know and walk that line of how much do I say, how much do I push?
Right.
We'll tell you that story coming up here. So hang on, stay with us.
Well, it would not be the Hopecast without us talking a little bit about Pat Davis, yourhealthplanman.com. Pat is a listener of the Hopecast. He has been a supporter of us since the very, very beginning. But more than anything, he's really passionate about making sure that you're kind of put back in control over your healthcare. So often it feels like the healthcare insurance companies just kind of rip you off, honestly. You put all the work in on the front side, and they kind of chip in where they can.
Well, the way it works is you have a claim, and then you're expected to pay, $5,000-$10,000 if you have a hospital stay, let's say, for an extended amount of time. And then they'll kick in at some point whenever, I guess, they feel like you can't pay anymore, right? Well, that's not the way it has to be, although that's kind of the industry standard.
That's the standard, yeah.
But Pat and his clients don't have to do that. You're talking about having 30 to 50% discounts on your monthly premiums. You're talking about a little to no deductibles, no copay, and then the insurance company actually paying before you do.
What a crazy idea.
It really is. I know it sounds too good to be true, but listen, I'm living proof of it. It really does work. It's exactly the way Pat says that it is. Because, and we use this example all the time, and we've shown you the bills before. I had a $79 doctor's appointment, but I got a check back from the insurance that covered that plus a little bit more. I mean, the total check I got back was $180.
So you were ahead of it.
So I'm ahead, yeah.
Right.
So, and that's the way it works with all of Pat's clients. But here's the thing. You've probably heard us, if you're new to the Hopecast, this may be the first time you hear it and you're going, wow, could this really be true? It is. If you have heard us talk about it and you haven't pulled the trigger, you haven't gone to yourhealthplanman.com, you need to do so and give Pat a chance just to sit down and visit with you about what he can do.
Well, really, because all it's going to cost you is just a few minutes of your time just to talk to Pat, kind of see what he can do. And there's no pressure. If there's a plan that you're just not quite sure about and you're like, I don't know if this is for me, no harm, no foul. Pat understands that, but he would love to share with you a little bit about what he offers.
And you can set the time up that works convenient in your schedule. Just go to yourhealthplanman.com.
Well, we're kind of doing a part 2 of what we were talking about last week, just the importance of witnessing, sharing our testimony, sharing our story, and sharing the gospel. And we're going to take things a little bit more personal because you have a story of sharing the gospel with somebody in your family.
Yeah, it was my dad. My dad never was a believer. We talked a little bit, if you're a Patreon member, we talked about it in my testimony that you got to saw as a bonus episode. My dad never was a believer, really. And
did he ever really go to church a whole lot?
He did as a kid a little bit, but
not much.
never really took too much and never really wanted much to do with it. And we talk about witnessing and the importance of being there and the importance of letting people know that you care and letting people know how much they need Christ as their Savior. But there is a line you have to recognize and you have to be there. And I think one of the things that always discouraged my dad, and really more than discouraged, angered him, was the fact that a well-meaning pastor in town where I grew up used to come by and want to visit with my dad all the time. Like almost every week. And it got to the point my dad just became so turned off with it. He would start locking the gate. He had a gate out in front of the house, and he would just start locking the gate 3 or 4 in the afternoon because he got to the point where he didn't want to talk about it anymore. He didn't want to discuss it with anybody, especially somebody he didn't really know or like or trust. And so
it almost had the opposite effect.
Oh, it did have the opposite effect.
Yeah.
It certainly did. He didn't want anything to do with it. And I think that to me always showed that there is a key, because I think what happens is, as Christians, we say, okay, it's our job to reach our lost friends and our lost family members. If we don't do it, who else is going to do it? But we take the place of God because I've got to make sure they get saved.
Right.
It's not in our hands. Our hands are what we're asked to do is just to present the message and allow that person.
Have our hands be open with it.
Yes, absolutely. And my dad never really did, especially with that. He was very angry. Now, there were times when I could approach it, and I think he saw what we were talking about earlier, the kind of the difference in my life and in my wife's life. You know, in fact, my dad would always say, he said, well, Steve and Jana, they're not sinners. You know, they're good people. They're, you know, and again, my dad being a very moral person, didn't see, he considered people that needed saving, people that were the bad people, the criminals, the people who, you know, that stole and, you know, on and on.
Things that he didn't do.
Things that he didn't do. Exactly. Right. And so, so the story would go on that I occasionally would have opportunities to talk to him about it, and he would always be very nice, but he would shut it down. Didn't want to talk about it. And then, and that kept on for years and years. And then finally, he got really sick toward the end of his life. He got really sick, and we were in the hospital. And I know for whatever reason, the pastor, who happens to be my pastor, my dad liked and respected for whatever reason. And they had become friendly. Again, my dad didn't talk a whole lot of spiritual stuff with anybody, but he would tolerate this pastor.
Right.
And so my dad is not quite technically on his deathbed, but pretty close. And because we knew we were getting to the end. And so we were talking about spiritual stuff, and he's not really making any decisions or anything. And I felt kind of compelled. I was like, I need to call the pastor. Yeah. And I called him and I said, hey, would you mind coming up here and talking with him? Because I think he'll listen to you. I think he respects you in the whole thing. Yeah. And so I walked out of the hospital room when the pastor got there, and I was just kind of let the two of them have the room. And I was kind of just walking up and down the halls, and I just was praying probably harder than I've ever prayed in my life, you know, asking God to break through and to do what only he can in the whole thing. And I mean, 10 minutes go by, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And finally the pastor appears from outside of the hospital room, and I'm expecting him. Well, let me back up. At some point during that about 20-minute time, I just felt this overwhelming sense of peace and just flood come over me. And I thought, well, he's just giving his life to the Lord. And so I was ready to rejoice when I saw the pastor come out, and he just looked like he'd been in a fist fight. He was just all defeated. He was like, I tried everything I could to talk to him. I tried everything and explained as much as I could. And he said, I've just never wanted anything to do with it. Never really believed. And I'm just not interested. I'm going to be okay. Everything will be fine. And so, so the pastor left kind of defeated, and now I was sitting here trying to wrestle with how does that work? I'm feeling
Why did you have that sense of peace?
Overwhelming sense of peace, and yet my dad is still saying no. So we were released from the hospital. We went to hospice care, and for the next couple of weeks, I was his caretaker at his house, and he finally passed away after probably, 2 or 3 days of just being asleep. I mean, if you've ever gone through that, being a caretaker for someone on hospice, that's what happens a lot of times. Right as you get to the very end, just a lot of rest, a lot of sleep. And I mean, he slept for days on end. Yeah. So I don't know what happened during that time where he was asleep, and, cause I'm sure there was all kinds of spiritual stuff going on that we couldn't see, now I don't know what happened, if anything happened, but I do know that I felt like I had that sense of peace and that sense of it's going to be okay with my dad at that hospital room, in that hospital hallway. I still really don't know to this day what that means, but I do know that I can trust God with that. So if I have any encouragement for you as you start talking about and start talking to people who you love, that you want to see come to know Christ, is number one, don't give up on them. Yeah. Always pray for, because I'm the world's worst. I gave up on him many times. Yeah. Look, he didn't want it. He didn't. So I'm not. And then I would get convicted by it, and I would say, God, if you'll give me another opportunity to talk to him, I will. And that cycle repeated for decades. I mean, it really did. And my dad was someone who was, very, very prideful and very, very, like I say, moralistic and very much always wanted to do the right thing, but he never did come to the, at least that I know of, acceptance of Christ. So my point is that if you're in that situation and you just don't see any fruit of it, all you can do is turn it over and trust. There's no way to beat them over the head. There's no way to twist their arm to force them to say, yes, I'll take Jesus as my Savior. I'll accept what he did. It just doesn't work like that. And sometimes stories don't always have a happy ending, although I don't know whether the happy ending is that God was telling me, hey, at some point in the next couple of days when you aren't around and it's just me and him, or if he's just given me a peace about a very difficult situation.
Well, that's what I was going to bring up. Maybe that peace that you felt was kind of a burden being lifted of, hey, this isn't your responsibility to get him saved, kind of like what we talked about earlier. It's not on any one person. It's not, your sole responsibility. And if it doesn't happen, then somehow you're at fault. That's not true. You shared the gospel, you did your part, and everything else is up to God. So maybe there was a piece there just with, like what you said, a very hard situation.
I felt like there was a release. It was almost like you don't have to talk to him about this anymore.
Yeah.
Now, what does that mean? I still don't know.
We're going to find out.
We'll find
Other
out.
side of eternity.
We'll find out one of these days.
Yeah.
But I felt leaving the hospital that day, I don't have to bring it up anymore because there was a few days that Dad was lucid. In fact, we had a really good conversation the Thursday before he passed away.
Yeah.
It was me and my kids, and we were all sitting together in his hospital bed. He had a hospital bed in his house, just watching TV and the whole thing, and just a really good family night, which would have made, that was the way he would want to have gone out, And then he passed away that weekend. But I just knew I didn't have to. Just knew that, and again.
And I remember because, we were still working together at the radio station during that time. And so you were kind of texting me updates. There were some times that you weren't able to come into work. And so I was covering your shift and just doing different things that way. And I remember, though, the text that you sent me when he passed away, you just said, my dad is at peace. He's not in pain anymore. He's gone. And it was hard because I knew all of the struggle that you'd been dealing with and sharing the gospel with him. And that was my first thought. I thought, well, did he become a Christian? And I was hoping so and praying for that. But I remember you sharing that piece that you had, once, we were back together again and things kind of calmed down, sharing that story with me. And that was just encouraging for my heart, knowing that regardless of what happened either way, the Lord was merciful in giving you that peace. That's a real gift. And I thought, even in the midst of a really difficult situation, the fact that you were able to have that is a real grace-filled gift for sure.
All right. I hope that, that doesn't bring anybody down, that story, So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's get something a little more fun. And that's our Patreon. We have got a brand new way we're doing Patreon. Our Hope Dealers is what we call those folks who have supported us monthly with donations. We do an entire Hope cast that's just for them. What you're seeing right now, actually, if you were a Patreon member, you wouldn't even see this.
If you're a Patreon, you don't even know that this part exists.
That's right. Because what we do is a couple of minute pre-show where we just, whatever's going on, which, by the way, this one, it's off the charts.
We got all over the place.
Yeah, we were all over the place. And then you get the show itself, ad-free and early, and then we do the aftercast, which this aftercast is going to have Bethany's story about breaking her foot, giving a high five.
It happened. It's a real story.
So we'll get to that here coming up. But that'll be exclusively for our Patreon members. And not only do you guys come alongside and help pay the production costs, but it's our creative team.
It's really it's a community of people. I think that's a good way of putting it, a creative team, because we do rely on you guys a lot for ideas of what to talk about, kind of getting your perspective, taking polls, and just getting an idea of what do you want us to talk about, because we want this to really be a family where we talk about everything, share ideas, and talk about things that maybe you're curious about.
And here's the thing, and for me, just being selfish.
Yeah.
This is also a kind of a small business for us. We're actually in this to make some money at it as well. And having the patrons come alongside of us helps keep me grounded a lot of times, because I get concerned, or not concerned, but I get anxious sometimes. Okay, well, what if this sponsor drops, or what if this person does this or this? And the patrons are always there saying, hey, but look how many people we're reaching. And it's the ministry aspect of it. So, I mean, just in a selfish part, you guys do so much just for me to keep my focus where it needs to be.
It's just encouraging. Yeah. Not only from a financial perspective, but just, the sweet messages that we get, the prayers that you guys are lifting for us. We really appreciate that. And on Patreon, there's kind of 2 tiers. So there's a $5 a month tier and then a $15 a month tier. You can read about the details there at patreon.com/Stephen Bethany's Hopecast.
All right, Stephen Bethany, Hopecast, rolling on. Glad that you're here. We want to try to bring us up a little bit, because I feel bad telling that story, because I don't want anybody to be sad and depressed. Here's the story we just finished up.
I don't know if my story is going to bring anybody up a little bit. I'm more just venting frustration.
I know.
This story.
Well, we're used to that. If you've been paying attention to this Hopecast, it might as well be called Bethany Gripes.
Okay, this is a legitimate gripe.
Bethany has a problem, ma'am.
Okay, sir. I do have a legitimate gripe, though. Listen to what happened. Okay.
All right.
Yesterday, my husband and I found something that just brought us both into the pits. We were just sad about this. So backing up, my car battery died probably 2 weeks ago, and had to get replaced. So my husband took it out, got a new battery. Fine, all taken care of. And he told me, he said, hey, I need you to take that old car battery back. Just take it in, because you can like trade it out and stuff. And so I was like, okay, yeah, sure. So he put it back in the back of my vehicle. I drive an SUV, so he put it back in the trunk. And I had a lot on my plate that week, completely forgot about it. So we found it like 4 or 5 days later. And Cody, my husband, was like, oh, well, yeah, you don't have time this week. I'll just take it. So he takes the car battery out, returns it, all said and done. My car started smelling weird. And I was like, well, I guess it's just I had the car battery in here. So it probably, I guess that's it. Didn't think a whole lot about it. Well, yesterday, I normally have the back row of my seats in my SUV down.
So you can see out the back.
That, and it makes it easier for groceries and all that stuff.
So you can see out the back.
So I can see out the back. No joke. When I popped them up, I was like, man, that interferes with my line of sight. Anyways, well, I had people riding with me yesterday after church. And so my husband and I popped up the back row of seats so everybody could get in and we could all ride together. We pop up the back, and I look at one of the seats in the very, very back, kind of in the trunk, and the stitching on it is completely undone. Like all the leather on the seat is just flayed up, like completely. You can see all the foam of the seat. It's ruined. And we were just looking at it like, what happened? Because the other seat next to it was completely fine. It's just this one part of my car. All the stitching is, all up, and it looks terrible. And we realized the car battery acid had leaked all over the back of my car. That's why my car was smelling bad, and it completely ruined the seat. Like horrible. So Cody and I are driving. Now that we know this, we're both mad. I was so annoyed. I was irritated mostly at myself.
But you're also an angry driver to begin with. So
this didn't help. And I was driving that day. I was behind the wheel. I was so irritated.
It's another reason to pray for Cody.
I'm not kidding. Cody had to put on a face mask because it smelled so bad. Once we popped the seat up, the acid was like right there.
Man.
We had headaches. I think I lost a couple brain cells yesterday, honestly, breathing that in. We had headaches. He put a face mask on just in the car with us because it smelled so bad. We had to roll down the windows, air it out. And now I think probably at this very moment, he's on the phone trying to figure out who can reupholster a car seat in my car.
Because that was my first question I was going to ask you, but I didn't, was did you tie the battery down in the trunk so it wouldn't slide around? Because the first thing I was thinking was that annoying sound when you turn, it's just sliding back and forth.
I just didn't think about it.
Did that not happen at all?
Well, and I don't know. I just really, that week was super busy, and I just didn't think a whole lot. So I was just getting in my car, rolling around, completely forgot I had it back there. And I, it was one of those things I thought, oh yeah, I need to take that in. I didn't think the car battery was going to leak everywhere, but
But it did.
It did. And I didn't know it was going to do that to the seat. It was horrible.
So your car insurance going to take care of any of it?
No.
Of course they're not.
Out of pocket, buddy.
That's exactly
out
what I
of
thought.
pocket.
That's exactly.
So that's what
I
I'm
thought.
dealing with.
Of course,
I mean,
there's the old joke too. Hey, is this going to be covered by the car insurance? And the answer is, I'm sorry, ma'am. Stupidity is not covered in the policy.
Okay.
So
okay.
It's the joke. It's the joke. It's not
rude. But here's the thing. It could have been worse. Not sure how, but it could have been worse. So that's what I'm telling myself. I guess we're going to go to the beach next week. So I think before we go to the beach, I'm going to drop it off, get it reupholstered, and then pick it up once we get back.
Here's how it could have been worse. It could have happened on your beach trip.
Okay.
It could have spilled all through the beach trip. You could have had battery acid.
It could have fried my clothes.
Yes, you could have battery acid all over everything and in your hair and everything.
I don't know.
It did passed out from the smells while you were driving.
My brother was sitting in the back seat yesterday when we were driving home from church, and he kind of had his hand like underneath his leg just sitting, and he goes like, my hand is actually kind of burning. And I was like, you're sitting in battery acid. What's wrong with you? He goes, no joke. It's actually kind of burning. I was like, go wash your hands. Soap and water.
Oh my goodness.
So we'll see. I haven't talked to my brother today, so I need to ask him if he still has fingers left.
No doubt.
We'll see.
No doubt. All right, well, that wraps it up for this week's Hopecast. Next week, we got a fun program planned for you.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this.
We've actually talked about it for the last couple of weeks, and I think we're ready to do it.
I think so. Yeah, we had the opportunity to interview Matthew West, and so we're going to be talking to him. He did something so cool, so personal for us. I'm pretty pumped about it.
Yep, it's going to be exciting. We were going to take it and just make it a bonus episode for Patreon.
Just for Patreon people.
But this turned out to be so good. We want to share it with everybody, and we'll do that. We'll do that next week. So we appreciate everybody joining us, and don't forget our social media accounts on Facebook, on Instagram. It's Steve and Bethany's Hopecast, and follow us there. We're always posting something fun. And we want you to be a part of it. Buy a T-shirt from us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can check out all of our merch. We have, coffee mugs. We have T-shirts. We have face masks, all of that stuff. And it's a great way to rep your favorite podcast.
Absolutely. You can find all the links to everything that we have, steveandbethany.com. I think that's it.
That's it.
Good night, Olive Branch.